All right, everyone. Welcome back. And so in our previous module, we were talking about how turfgrass kind of moved into the landscape and became, center stage in many of the landscapes that we see today. We see that transition from it being basically more of a functional or utilitarian role to actually being part of landscape for aesthetics, for practicality, but aesthetics, functionality, durability, playability. So see a lot of these transitions as our culture and society evolves and becomes more complex. Turfgrass evolves and is used more and more, and so it's an interesting parallel to see that turfgrass really is a sign of the evolution of civilization. And the more complex and evolved that our civilization becomes, the more turfgrass is used. And that is definitely apparent today if we really stop and think about all of the areas that grass is used in our modern landscapes, and a lot of areas that we don't even conventionally think of, like green roof systems. So just another example of how turfgrass is utilized more and more as our society evolves. So I wanted to get into a little bit of the discussion about why we use turfgrass as much as we do in our landscape and environment. And the simple answer is because it's very adaptable. It's probably the most adaptable plant on Earth. You can see in this picture here, I mean, you guys probably are aware, you can find grass growing almost anywhere. It is very opportunistic. It's very good at adapting. So you can see on the list here, it's extremely tolerant of a wide temperature range. If we think about the climatic conditions on Earth that kind of led to the evolution of all of the species of grass that we have today, that's a testament to just how tolerant and adaptable this grass is. And again, if you remember, it really was the climatic conditions of the Ice Age, these cold, arid conditions, but also the extremes. If you think about how extreme our weather is from season to season on Earth, this wasn't always the case in Earth's geologic history. There were times when Earth was much more tropical, and the temperatures were much more consistent than they are today. So a lot of the plants that we see today on Earth, especially in the temperate regions of Earth, the northern and southern hemispheres, they had to evolve, they had to adapt to the climatic conditions that they were being subjected to. And grass is a prime example of that. So as a result, one of the things that makes turfgrass useful is how tolerant it is of wide temperature ranges. So especially the cool season grasses. Grass is very tolerant of different soil types. If you look right here, I mean, it's literally growing in a crack in the pavement. I'm sure you've seen this before. It can grow in a very, very wide range of areas. If there's a little bit of soil and a little bit of moisture, or not even necessarily soil, but just growing media of some kind, whether it's gravel or dust, I mean, it has the ability to survive, which is pretty remarkable, because I don't know too many plants that could do this otherwise. And so it's very tolerant of different soil types. And when we think about soil types, I'm speaking specifically about soil texture. I'm also speaking about chemistry. So it can grow in rich soils. It can grow in very poor soils. And, we have to think about that, especially in our urban settings, that, in many cases, we are dealing with what we would refer to as poor urban soils. The topsoil's been removed. Usually it's the subsoil, the backfill, and the rubble that's left behind from construction is graded out on the property. Oftentimes, especially in our dense urban areas, you're dealing with, demolition sites, vacant areas that, probably have buildings on them at one point in time. So you're not dealing with the best substrate, for life when it comes to plant material. But grass has the ability to survive in some pretty harsh conditions. It's also very tolerant of varying levels of soil moisture. I mean, if you have a house plant or you think about plants in a landscape, they can wilt and die a lot easier than grass. So grass has developed the ability to survive when it doesn't have water, and this can go on sometimes for weeks. And as long as it receives a minimal amount of moisture over that given period of time, it will not die. Any plant can die if it is subjected to enough extremes, whether it's extreme temperature, extreme dry, extreme cold. Any plant can ultimately die, and grass is no different. So I don't want to paint the picture that it's invincible. But it is pretty rugged, tough stuff, and it really takes a lot to do it in. I mean, if you think about driving through a neighborhood and you see all the plant material, I'm sure at times you may have seen dead or dying bushes, dying trees on the landscape, but the grass still survives year after year after year. So again, it's very tolerant of many things, but in particular soil moisture. And usually in the landscape setting, what I run into is stuff is either too wet or too dry. And so either way, grass is very tolerant of those conditions. It's very durable. If you think about the pictures back in the earlier module about the grazing and how pastures can literally be mowed down to next to nothing, and if you take them out of rotation a few weeks later, give them a shot of fertilizer and then come back a few weeks later, you couldn't even tell. The grass is all back and thriving and doing well. So it's very durable. It can take a lot of traffic. It can take a lot of play on athletic fields. That's why it is used so extensively on athletic fields. If you think about a lot of times, if you go into any festivals or events where you have to park out in open grass areas, same thing. I mean, you're driving vehicles that weigh several thousand pounds over it over and over and over again. And, it'll take time, but eventually that grass will come back. It either grows back into those areas where other grass plants died, or the crowns stay intact and it doesn't die. So it's extremely durable, which makes it very, very useful. And, all of these things, I think, play into just why you see it so extensively used in the landscape setting. And, I would say that, on a side note, I do see a trend with a lot of schools converting their main fields over to artificial turf. And it's really unfortunate. Because, and we'll talk about it here a little bit later in this section, but, I think it really has to do with a lack of skill set. When you look at the personnel, the maintenance personnel, a lot of times your maintenance personnel in these schools and athletic facilities are dual purpose. They're maintaining facilities, the buildings, the HVAC systems, in addition to the grounds, and the grounds are kind of on the back burner. Many of them come into that and they have to run it, without any experience. In fact, I remember several years ago, I was down at Mount Vernon Nazarene University. We had a gray leaf spot outbreak on their athletic fields. And I was talking to the gentleman who had been hired probably a few months before, and he was the, in charge of facility and maintenance and grounds at MVNU. And it was interesting because he told me, he said, I have zero experience when it comes to grass. I literally have no idea what I'm doing. I was a mason by trade before I took this job. And unfortunately, I think that's, it's a combination of a status symbol. Basically, a lot of schools do it out of status, and a lot of schools do it because their personnel are just don't have the skill set to maintain athletic fields, because they are maintained differently, from a different level, or on a different level than our aesthetic turf in our lawn settings. So, we'll break down each one of these a little bit more. Extremely tolerant of different soil types and conditions. So again, looking at a lot of our urban sites, whether it's in subdivisions or even, in commercial properties, we're typically, especially in Northeast Ohio, we are dealing with junk. Okay. It is heavy, compacted, silty clay soils. There is a wide range of pH and nutrient availability. I run a lot of soil tests for people, and they just consistently come back bad, all kind of messed up. And in addition to it, when we look at these sites, we have other factors that we have to consider as well. Things like salinity. What would salinity have to do? Well, think about a place like, say, Cleveland Clinic, Cleveland Clinic main campus downtown in Cleveland. There's a lot of turf. There's about 450 acres of land that encompasses the Cleveland Clinic, and a good chunk of it is grass. These grass areas more than likely will eventually become buildings or parking garages or you name it. But there's still grass, and there's grass strips, and there's grass malls, and there's also a lot of sidewalks. There's a lot of paved areas down there. So you think about that. Think about all of the de-icing materials that are going down on these properties up in this area in Northeast Ohio over the course of the winter. So we end up with a lot of salinity. In the background, I don't know if you can see it in this slide, but the bottoms of those bushes are brown, and this is up against the building. In the foreground here, you can't see it in the picture, but there's a sidewalk. That is all salt injury, salt damage on those taxus. And the grass, as you can see in the foreground, in between it and the sidewalk, is perfectly green and healthy. So again, building on that durability, and that, ability to survive in some very messed up situations. Here's a perfect picture that shows that, of how the grass is able to survive, with the sidewalk, with the bushes. The bushes are taking a beating, but the grass is perfectly fine. And you'll see this a lot, especially if you go to any shopping malls or plazas where you see a lot of plant material. Again, the grass is not invincible. It's not a superhero. It's not going to, be able to totally survive, but it is incredibly tough stuff, and it is able to survive in a lot of harsh situations. So it's extremely tolerant of very varying levels of moisture. And you can see here, you can see that lawn in the background in this image. So obviously one's getting water, one isn't. Okay. This is drought stress. All right. And it's not the prettiest thing to look at, but you know what? This is a survival mechanism that the grass employs in these kinds of harsh conditions. And this is one of the things that it developed, a trait that it evolved, or, had adapted, that allows it to survive, again, in extremely hot, extremely arid conditions. And if you give this a decent shot of water, it will start to green up. In fact, you can kind of see a little bit of the green up there in the foreground, where you can see some new blades of grass starting to push up through. Again, it's not the prettiest thing to look at. And interestingly, out in Southern California, for example, they have a lot of watering bans, watering restrictions. But again, we still have a lot of turf. They actually have services. You can pay people to come out and more or less spray paint the turf with special turf paint that basically turns it green. So instead of looking at this, you're actually looking at green. I've actually had some situations up here in previous years where I've done that on grass, after say Avon Commons, for example. I know one year they hosted the 4th of July fireworks for the city of Avon at Avon Commons, and the grass up in all over in that area just got destroyed, and the management needed to do something to keep it looking good, so they actually paid a client of mine to come in and spray turf paint in those areas where it was heavily damaged. And it worked pretty well. Honestly, I mean, this grass, when you paint it green, it doesn't look half bad. Maybe it's a service that we can consider offering up here at some point if our climate continues to do strange things. So we'll see what happens in time. Extremely durable. So its ability to fill in and recover from heavy traffic, and its resilience. So those are two different traits that are pretty cool about turfgrass. So if you look here, this is on the left-hand side is soccer field that's had some play, and you can see at the goal mouths and basically center field. You can see where you've had intense play on this, a lot of cleat action on this field, and it's basically done its damage. And you can see on the right where over time that grass has filled in and recovered. So these are before and after pictures. So this shows the ability of grass to fill in and recover. Now, not every species can do well. I'll back up. All species can do this. Not all of them do it as well. So some species are much more aggressive. Some cultivars of grass are bred to do this specifically to recover quickly. And certain weedy grasses have the ability to do this very well. Not every grass species has the ability to fill in as quickly, but they all have the ability to fill in. If given enough time, any dead spot will fill in eventually with grass by doing absolutely nothing. So it's self-healing. It's very resilient. So if you think about it, and you look at this soccer field, yeah, there's some areas where basically the grass was done in. Okay, it was just too much traffic on it, too much play, and it did end up killing the grass in those areas. But look at all the surrounding areas that are still alive and green. So it's extremely resilient, and so these two things, so its ability to heal and recover and its resilience make it extremely durable. So what are some of the benefits of turfgrass? Well, temperature moderation is a big one. We don't always think about it. Usually we think about trees and urban forests, and there's a lot of talk that we have, and believe me, I'm a huge advocate of urban forestation. It does make a difference, but we tend to overlook grass's role. I think a lot of times we kind of have this bad image or grass has a bad reputation. We think of it as just this frivolous thing that we don't really need, and we should be planting other things and native species, and I'm a big advocate of that. But like I said in the beginning, it's been a love-hate relationship with me with grass over the last 20 plus years. But I will tell you that I've really grown to respect and admire it. and it definitely has a role to play. And a lot of these things where it gets kind of a bad rap, mainly I think because of the mowing and the pesticides and the fertilizers and everything. But we are working. I mean, there is a lot of work, breeding and hybridization, turf development that's occurring today that is trying to address some of these, because honestly, I mean, even in this industry, and my income is dependent on it, I'm not a fan of it. Trust me, there are a lot of times where I would just love to not have to mow the grass any more than I have to. So it does require a lot of maintenance, but there are a lot of benefits to having it. So the canopy absorbs and stores heat, so it can be as much as 15 degrees hotter than the ambient air. You know, you think about that sun beating down on it. If you take a temperature reading down at the canopy level, I mean, it is hot. So, again, we think about that heat tolerance. It can tolerate some temperature extremes. So this is no different. When it's sitting there baking on the ground, I mean, it can be as much as 15 degrees hotter than the ambient air. So if it's a 90-degree day, that canopy could be 105 degrees easily. And then it releases that heat back at night. So we don't, in areas where we have turf, we tend to, see it kind of slowly release that heat. So it almost acts like a heat sink to some degree, and it absorbs all of that heat in the urban environment during the day and then gently releases it at night. So, as a result, it's going to reduce that urban heat island effect. And the result is that the air, if you look at ambient air, the ambient air in a lawn setting is 10 to 14 degrees cooler than in a paved area. So if you think about being out in a lawn, let's just take this, for example. Think about this rooftop garden. So this happens to be a picture of Rockefeller Center in Manhattan. So rooftop garden. We have a green roof system here, and that environment right there. I mean, I don't know if anybody's ever been up on a rooftop on a hot summer day. It is not pleasant. It's extremely hot. So, we think about if we employ this kind of a setup more, even though it's grass, just doing grass maybe. We started employing this more in our urban environments on these rooftops. I mean, this could have a profound benefit to reduce the ambient air temperatures versus, asphalt or rubber membrane roof systems, which really are doing nothing. And next time you think about it, watch the weather forecast on the news in the summertime and just look at, what the temperatures look like in, say, Cleveland or Lakewood versus being out in somewhere like maybe Vermilion or Medina, and that'll be all you need to see about the difference in ambient air temperatures and the urban heat island effect that we see. So again, grass can be very useful in fighting these kinds of conditions in our urban settings. I talked a little bit about, grass and, how kind of dismayed or disappointed I am to see this big shift away from artificial turf and into synthetic turf. And frankly, some of it I think is profit driven. I mean, you think about what it costs to put one of these artificial fields in. I mean, it could be, in upwards of $875,000. That field has a lifespan, if it's perfectly maintained, of about 8 to 10 years. I mean, it's no different than carpet in a house. So think about carpet. What happens to carpet over time? Well, the same thing is going to happen to artificial turf. Again, it doesn't have the ability to heal like grass does. So it cannot grow new plants. It cannot grow new blades of grass. So over time, that artificial turf is going to wear out. And I don't care how much crumb rubber you put on it. There's a lot of safety concerns when it comes to artificial turf versus natural turf. Okay. One, I mean, I just mentioned crumb rubber. There have been some studies done where young women playing field sports on artificial turf started developing certain health issues as a result of the VOCs, the volatile organic compounds given off by that crumb rubber. I mean, let's think about what crumb rubber is. We throw these words around. We don't really think about it often. So your tires on your car, they get ground up. And sometimes they use that material for rubber mulch. Sometimes they use that material for playgrounds for kids. And sometimes they use it in a product called crumb rubber, which is used on artificial turf to help cushion the turf and make it more playable. So it's a recycled product, but it is a waste product. And if you don't know it, tire disposal is a big problem. There's nothing that can be really done other than to ship them to a landfill. And so you have an entire industry that's kind of cropped up to kind of figure out neat and creative ways to discreetly dispose of rubber tires. We think about, there's an old saying, the solution to pollution is dilution, right? And I really believe this is no different. You take these tires, grind them up, spread them all over the artificial turf that the kids play on. It's great. It's a great idea, and make money at it at the same time. Welcome to America. So that's a safety concern. I don't want to get too caught up in the weeds on that, but I'll give you my little pulpit spiel on that, being a turf guy. The other issue that we don't think about, we hear about it in the news, but we don't think about this too much, is I'm sure you've seen at points where we have issues with heat stroke. Okay. And I don't know, my son played football, and some of you may have played football or other sports, and they talk about hydration all the time. My son did 2-a-days. They would come out in the morning and then they'd come out again in the afternoon, basically avoiding the dead heat of the day. But why is this all of a sudden a big issue? Because when I was a kid growing up a long time ago, I never heard any of this, and it was never discussed. I mean, kids would go out after school and practice, and they wouldn't push it off till later in the evening. You'd suit up, go right out after school and practice. Okay. You practice during the summer, right in the middle of the day. It was not a big deal. But now we do 2-a-days. We maybe block it out if the weather's too extreme. So what's going on here? What changed in this situation? Is it global warming? No. If you look here at this, at these couple of images, if you can make them out on the slide, one of them is from, actually I found it from an English site, so it's in degrees Celsius and metric. But you can see in there artificial grass in the shade, artificial grass in the sun. So just to give you an idea, your body temperature, 98.6 is normal. That's basically, 37 degrees Celsius roughly. So just to give you an idea of how this relates to body temperature. I don't know too many artificial fields that are in the shade. Usually they're in the stadium, especially at the high school level. It's an open air stadium. They're out there baked in the sun. So this is midday. You're looking at temperatures that are nearly double the human body temperature. Okay. And you figure you've got all your gear on, suited up out on that field. That's just a recipe for disaster. By comparison, if you look at real grass, natural turf in the shade versus the sun, it's actually not too bad. So, you look here, real grass in the sun, all right, it's 38 degrees Celsius. So if the human body temperature is roughly 37, that's right there. So even in the heat of day, Natural turf is clearly a safer choice when it comes to heat exhaustion and heat stroke. The biggest challenge that I see with natural sports fields is the surface inconsistency that's created. I call them ankle breakers. That's one of the biggest problems when you're out. If you have if that playing field isn't, taken care of properly, which most of them aren't, you're going to have a lot of unevenness on that field and the playing surface. So the way that we deal with that is you top dress. Okay. But, unfortunately, a lot of schools don't have the ability to do that. It's not a big investment. Most of them don't want to spend the money, and most of the personnel at the school, again, many of them are wearing 5 or 6 hats at the same time. They're running around, chasing down HVAC problems and other mechanical issues and so on and so forth. So they don't want to devote a lot of time. It's very rare that I run across a school that has a person that actually is very invested in the athletic turf. They exist. It's just very rare that I find them. So and the other thing to think about too is, grass gives off humidity. So as it's sitting out there in the sun, it's evapotranspiring. And we think about hydration. You have that humidity. Versus it being very hot and dry. I mean, again, think about the urban heat island effect, or if you're, sitting out in a parking lot at a shopping plaza, how hot, how baked you feel sitting in that environment. Well, artificial grass is no different. You feel just like you're out on a parking lot. And so that's why we have this increased concern over safety. So dangerous temperatures. If you look here, in this graph, this was a study done at Brigham Young University on their practice fields. It's from 2002, but it does a good job to illustrate the point. So average air temperature, 81.42 degrees Fahrenheit. So, July, June, July, August, that's not far off from the average daytime air temperature around here. Yeah, we have hotter days and we have some cooler days in the summertime. Okay, but overall, BYU isn't much different from Ohio in the summertime. So if we look at this synthetic football field, all right, the average temperature, okay, this is the average surface temperature between 7 a.m. when the sun is coming up and 7 p.m. when the sun is going down. 117 degrees. That's above the human body temperature of 98.6, okay? And that's the average temperature. So if you look at the high temperature at the peak of the day, 156 degrees, that's why we have two-a-days, folks, okay? Because that right there is a recipe for disaster with anybody. I don't care how in shape you are. There's no way you can hold up, on a 2 or 3 hour practice under that kind of temperature extreme. It's just you're gonna have heat exhaustion. You're gonna have heat stroke set in. So again, if you look at the average soil temperatures at a 2-inch depth, again, it does a good job of illustrating what's going on there. But then look at natural turf right behind it. Okay, the highest temperature. The highest average surface temperature that the natural grass had over this period of time in June was 88.5 degrees. Okay, and why would we use June? June is, obviously, we know that's when summer begins. That's the summer solstice. So that basically is when the sun is at its zenith in the sky in the northern hemisphere. That's when we have the longest day length of sunlight on, June 20th, June 21st, roughly. So you have this period of time where every day we're having increasing daylight and increasing insolation every day versus, when we get into July and August, it decreases. So this is a really good time to be out here measuring this stuff because, again, we have this steady increase in insolation and solar energy on these fields. But again, look at grass. 78 to 88 degrees Fahrenheit during the day. Average soil temperatures between 80 and 90 at a 2-inch depth. So, it just goes to show you that it's holding up really, really well compared to artificial turf when it comes to safety. The biggest problem, again, is ankle breakers. It can be addressed, and if you go on, in this day and age, if you go on and you watch some YouTube videos, it's not that hard. Okay, it's possible to maybe get equipment on loan from a golf course. It could be possible to even pay somebody, subcontract a service provider to come in and provide the service. There are service providers out there, landscape contractors and whatnot, that have equipment that's able to go out and perform this work. So it's just, I think it really comes down to laziness. It's a lack of desire that, I don't really need to worry about this. It's a big deal to school administration. It's not a big deal to the grounds people. Okay. And so you have this disconnect. And I think that disconnect is what leads to a lot of these and the ego to say that we have an artificial field too. The other thing that's happening too, I guess I'll say on the other side of the argument, is these fields are being used more and more and more. So when you think about, soccer and lacrosse and field hockey and all of the sports, we have a lot of sports in a lot of the school districts today, and they all want to play on the main field. Okay. They all want to be in that stadium. As these sports become more and more, I guess demanded, as the interest grows in these different sports, so does the need to use these main, football fields, or convert them to artificial. And, sometimes there's situations, like say Rocky River, for example, where, it's pretty landlocked. There's not a lot of space for the school to sprawl out and have acres and acres of practice fields. But, so it's not, I don't want to disparage people and say that there isn't a place. There is a place and a use for this. And, there are times that it makes sense. Okay. But it's not necessarily less expensive. It is more expensive to install. It's probably comparable in price to maintain, compared to a well-maintained, athletic field. So they would be about even as far as maintenance costs. You do have increased equipment costs because you do have to buy specialized grooming equipment for artificial turf. You also have, sanitation. Okay. So another thing we didn't talk about is stuff like MRSA. All right. MRSA is a big problem on artificial turf, and, you can contract MRSA through abrasions, or just bacterial infections in general, staph infections in general. It doesn't have to be MRSA, but this can be a big problem on artificial turf. Okay. There are a lot of safety concerns. You just have to be mindful of them. You have to be mindful of what it takes to maintain an artificial turf, and just know that there's pros and cons to either side. Okay. Ultimately, though, I like to tell a lot of the schools that I work with, I said, you can hire a company to come in and strip and resod a football field every 3 or 4 years if you wanted to, and you probably still wouldn't be at half the cost of installation of a new artificial turf. And my whole thing is, if the football boosters wants to do it so bad, let them pick up the tab. Don't put it on the taxpayer's back. It drives me crazy when I see school districts ask for levies, and then somehow in the budget they snuck in $2.5 million rider there that they didn't tell any of the constituents about. We need money for the teachers and new schools, but okay, we're going to slip in this $2.5 million budget line item for a new football field with artificial turf. It's kind of sneaky and deceptive, and frankly, like I said, you can come in and hire a sports construction company to come in and replace that field probably 2 or 3 times over the lifespan of that artificial turf. and still come nowhere near to the cost. Let's not talk about disposal fees. Let's not talk about the other health risks that are coming along with that artificial turf. And frankly, let's face it, if your maintenance personnel aren't going to take care of the natural grass, what makes you think that they're going to do any better job of taking care of that artificial turf any better? I mean, let's be real here. So, okay, that's my sermon for the day. So let's move on here to traffic stress. Okay. So if you think about it, I mean, again, I talked about like a parking setting, like let's just say we go down to Blossom, or you go out to the, if they ever have it again, the haunted Halloween trail or something out there at Carlisle Reservation out by Oberlin. There's a lot of grass parking areas. I don't know if anybody's been down to Mapleside Farms. I mean, they just turned that into condos, but there used to be a big grass area that they used for parking there. So we think about that. I mean, we got a lot of areas that are just basically old pastures, not really highly maintained turf, but just old pasture areas and stuff that we'll often use for parking when we need to. And it survives. Every year it comes back, grows back in. So what if we combine it with reinforcement, and I got a little typo there. I didn't catch that one. So in combination with reinforcement, you could use it for areas that are prone for high traffic stress, such as driveways and parking lots. And you may have seen this. If you go over to Crocker Park, there's an area in the back you probably wouldn't normally think to check out, but if you go back by Dick's at Crocker Park, there's actually a residential area. If you want to check it out, I don't know if they still have it, but all of the entranceways into those townhomes, they have like a parking garage, basically in the lower level, an actual garage, they're residential garages, but the driveways, at least the last time I saw them, where this exact kind of setup where you have a reinforced driveway. What a cool idea. I mean, honestly, I would consider doing something like this at my house. I think it's pretty cool. I don't know how well it would work in the wintertime as far as, snow removal and snow plowing, but I will tell you that, if you give turf good sun in the wintertime, you get a good sunny day. I mean, it can generate enough heat in that canopy. Again, we think about it's a heat sink, and it can take heat in from the environment and insulation from the sun and radiate that heat back out. Maybe this could be a solution to some of our parking areas when it comes to snow and ice management, because you're providing two things: drainage, and you're providing a living heat sink. That can maybe assist with that. I don't know. It definitely would be worth experimenting with. Again, you can use this in conjunction with permeable paver or grid systems to create a living driveway or a living parking lot. So pretty cool. Erosion control. So it establishes quick. It grows a deep, dense root system usually, especially depending on which grass variety you use. It has the ability to grow a deep, dense root system. And again, it establishes very quickly. So, I've done athletic fields where we go grow to play in 60 days. So if you manage it properly, yeah, you can definitely, get this thing off to a start pretty quick. But, that combination, the deep rooting and the quick establishment, make it an ideal candidate for soil stabilization. So, and I didn't pull it in very specifically, but I had a contractor recently that was working on a project, and they created, so it was a commercial site down in the Independence area, and they had this huge 3-acre parking lot. And for whatever reason, the construction company decided that they're going to grade this parking lot, asphalt parking lot, so that this entire thing runs from one end of the property to the other, and along the edge of this parking lot is this huge swale, you know, as a detention basin swale. And so instead of, you know, putting in catch basins and a drain tile system, they basically just pave this whole thing so all the water sheets off into this drainage basin that my client planted with grass. Okay. And we had a lot of issues, obviously, because it wasn't really executed well. I'll just leave it at that. But their heart was in the right place. But I spent a lot of time, interestingly I never thought I'd get into this, but I spent a lot of time getting into pavement and water sheeting and how you design parking areas, paved surfaces, and how you kind of address water management as it's related to that, and runoff and all of these things. And, there was some very good information that came out of a lot of those. I found a lot of it actually state of New Jersey had some really good resources talking about that, of all places. And they were talking about, the capacity of certain areas, and just how much water they could absorb and the force of water that they could absorb. And the take home from this is, within reason, established turf can withstand excessive runoff. I mean, we're talking 50 and 100-year rains, inches and inches and inches of rainfall. So when it is established, I mean, it can take a lot. It's not invincible. It's not a superhuman. Okay. But if it gets established and it gets a good footing, I mean, and this example I was using in Independence is no different. Once that grass, we had a lot of trouble getting it established, but once that grass gets growing in there, like we look at this situation right here, I mean, this is almost vertical. Okay. So this is a bio grid type system, retention wall type system that's reinforced and then planted with grass. Again, it's being used in this, basically a drainage swale. And that's pretty good sized diameter pipe there. So clearly this turf is going to take a fair amount of water flow going through here if you get a heavy rain. And that, again, is a good illustration of just how much, we talk about water management and how much turf can take too little or too much rain. I mean, if you were to plant a bunch of blue spruce down this, they'd die. There's no way that they could survive in this environment, even waterlogged, even with standing water to some degree. I mean, think about ditches the next time you drive along a road, and there's ditches on the side. What's growing in it? Grass. So again, it illustrates what I was talking about earlier on about its ability to survive in some very big extremes when it comes to too dry or too wet. And this would be your too wet. So flood and runoff management, again, it helps with not just being able to withstand periods of excessive rainfall or runoff, but it also improves water infiltration. So if we think about a paved area, a parking lot or a driveway versus a lawn, when we get a heavy rain, all of that rain is going to run off. Even in a light rain, we're going to have runoff, okay, on a paved surface. But we don't in grass. Why is that? Well, grass is really cool in that it kind of creates an obstacle course for the water to flow through. So, if you think about a paved surface like a driveway, I mean, there's nothing stopping the flow of that water. However, in a lawn situation, you have all of this grass and crowns and thatch and rhizomes and stolons and everything going on in this grass. I mean, it's a woven labyrinth for the water to get through, and so that really helps to slow the flow of surface water during heavy rains and even light rains. Prevents the water from running off, and basically does this by slowing the flow and giving the water more time to move into the surface. And this is really important in our urban settings, because when you think about how much of the landscape has been removed and replaced with structures or paved surfaces, this creates a lot of problems for stormwater management and runoff, especially in our urban areas like in Cleveland. Okay, and we have to spend billions of dollars on stormwater management systems to be able to collect and hold this stormwater so that it can be processed and safely released back out into Lake Erie or into our waterways, because otherwise it's going right down that storm drain and right into the streams and rivers around us and right out to Lake Erie. And, it's taking whatever's along for the ride with it. And so we have to spend billions of dollars now to, improve the waste management, the stormwater management systems in our urban areas to prevent this from happening. Okay. You may not know it, but when you're a property owner in a lot of these areas, if you have paved areas, patios, driveways, things like that, you may be assessed a tax or a fee. If you have stormwater collection from your downspouts, you're being assessed a fee, because if that's going into the sewers, there's no other way. Now, in new subdivisions and new developments out in our suburban areas, they actually started passing laws that require stormwater to be managed on site. So whenever you go to any of these areas and you see, these big detention basins and ponds and things like that, that's why those are there. They are there to, again, slow the movement of water, give that water the ability to be reabsorbed back into the environment, versus going into the sewer. And turfgrass plays a really, really important role in this by slowing the flow of surface water during heavy rains to give it more time to move into the soil. So along kind of the same lines is biofiltration. Okay. Grass, like a lot of living things, has the ability, or ecosystems for that matter, grass has the ability to filter pollutants out of runoff. Okay, so again, very important for stormwater management because it's intercepting the water from these parking lots, driveways, whatever, whether it's a shopping complex or a subdivision, it's collecting that water. But that ecosystem in that detention basin is actually processing and filtering that water. Well, we also use this to some degree, especially in residential settings, where we are taking what's called the gray water. So when you flush your toilets and you take your showers and do your laundry and clean the dishes, and you have a septic system. Let's say you live out in a rural area, or you live in an area that doesn't have sanitary sewers, you're going to have a septic system. And you're usually going to have a leach field, or you're going to have one of these aeration, basically an aeration system where, it's taking not the black water that goes in the septic tank, but the gray water, the water that's on the surface, goes into this system, and bumped something there, and it goes into this system where it's sprayed out over the grass area. And I've seen more and more of these with the newer subdivisions. They used to do the raised leach mounds. It was kind of the same concept. But now they're doing this a lot more, especially down in Medina County. I'm seeing a lot of this where, I think at like 2 or 4 in the morning in the dead of night, the pumps kick on, and then the gray water basically is pumped out, discharged, and sprayed out over one of these areas. And then the ecosystem basically does the job of purifying the water. So it's really a neat and ingenious system. But again, grass is really an ideal biofilter to help with the removal of the leach aid from these leach fields. Another thing that we don't always think about is, just like most other plants, it filters air pollutants. So it does filter when we think about a lot of the exhausts and and whatnot in our urban settings. You know, we think about how important trees are for air quality in our urban settings, but grass is equally important, and it does play a significant role in air filtration. It's used for land reclamation. Okay, so again, when we think about a demolition site where we go in and clear out an area, or a brownfield site, which is an area where maybe it was an old factory or an old landfill site where, you know, hazardous materials were spilled or dumped. You know, a lot of times grass is used in these areas both as a cap, so they use it for, again, soil stabilization and erosion control, because if that soil leaves, right, if it gets in the runoff after a heavy rain, it's going to take everything along with it, you know, for a ride. Okay, so grass is very good at capping it. That's why we use it so extensively on landfill mounds, but it also serves a use in a lot of our brownfield sites or areas where we've demolished old buildings, because it tolerates a lot of crappy soils, grows in poor soil situations where there's a lot of debris potentially. And also, grass and other plants, but grass in particular, has the ability to survive in areas where you may have, hazardous materials in the soil that can aid in the process of creating an ecosystem, again, that can help to clean and regenerate those soils and remove those pollutants. So again, on air quality and removal of air pollutants, well, what about carbon sequestration? So turf can do that. We usually, again, think about trees, all right? But turf actually can sequester quite a bit of carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. So 1 acre of turf can sequester about a half ton of CO2 per year. And the other benefit to it, which is not the same with trees and other landscape plantings, is it has the ability to generate biomass and soil organic matter very quickly. So again, you kind of see all these themes kind of intertwining with each other. We get back to poor soil reclamation, its ability to not only sequester carbon, but it's turning that carbon into biomass and is actually regenerating our soils, cleaning the soils, so on and so forth. Yellow.
Hey.
Hi.
Can you take the racket chair out to the corner? Have the lady come pick it up.
Okay, I'm in the middle of recording a thing, so give me a little bit.
Okay, well, I'm just going to take time to get there, but
all right.
She's like, needs to leave, and I needed to confirm. Okay, thanks.
All right.
Bye.
So, anyways, as I was saying, it does play an important role in carbon sequestration. And, the benefit to the soils is that it does, again, create biomass and contribute to soil organic matter very quickly. So some species and varieties are very tolerant of salinity. And, we don't think about salinity a lot, but again, we talked about, de-icing salts, road salt, doing damage to the grass. But we also talk about, salt spray in coastal areas. So, or maybe some of our more arid climates, like down in the Southwest, those soils can tend to be very, saline. So, anyways, we can get salt spray in a lot of these coastal areas. We can end up with salinity. We were talking a moment ago about gray water. So think about everything that's in that gray water, all your soaps and detergents and things like that. So we have salinity In gray water, we have salt spray around coastal areas or other areas with poor soil that may just naturally have a high salinity. And then our de-icing salt along our roadways. So all your tree lawns and other areas like urban areas and, commercial properties. So there's a lot of work that's being done with development and hybridization of turf grasses that meet these demands. Touchy mouse today. So that's a low cost to install. So a typical lawn installation runs about $0.25 per square foot. So, carpet in my house, I had a guy, come out recently to quote me on some carpet. It was going to cost about $5 to $6 a square foot with the carpet and pad and removal. And, and that's going to last me, maybe about 8-10 years if I'm lucky, if my kids don't trash it sooner. We think about that. Typical lawn installation runs about $0.25 per square foot. That's, it's going to be more depending on the, what you're doing, or it could be less. So, but I would say on average, it runs about $0.25 per square foot. It doesn't require a lot of manpower, skill, or equipment to put it in. That's part of the reason it's so cheap. Okay. I mean, to go out and actually prepare an area for seeding and do all the seed prep and everything and put the seed down, fertilize it, cover it with straw or whatever. I mean, it doesn't require a lot of manpower, skill necessarily to do that, because again, we think about the fact that grass has the ability to survive just about anywhere. And I've seen a lot of, I would call them questionable installations, where they really did do the bare minimum to try and get the grass grow. And somehow by some miracle, the grass is able to survive and grow. So again, a testament to turf grass and just how resilient it is and how tolerant it is and how easily it can adapt to, some pretty harsh conditions, poor soil structure. Again, not a lot involved when it comes to installation, relatively inexpensive. By comparison, if we think about blacktop, much more labor and equipment intensive to install. There's zero environmental benefit unless somebody can tell me otherwise. There's zero environmental benefit to using asphalt, and it again promotes the runoff. There's oils and other VOCs, other harmful compounds in it that as it's aging, it's going to give off these compounds. So guess what? It's going to go into the runoff. And if you don't have bioswales or anything like that, that runoff's going right into the sewer and right out to Lake Erie. So, again, contributing to water quality issues. And, and let's look at the cost. Okay. $4 per square foot. Now, again, I don't know that we're at a point where we're going to eliminate asphalt. I'm not suggesting that, as long as we're driving cars and need a place to park them and need roads to drive them on, asphalt is at this point in time, it's what we've got to work with. Again, I'm sure technology and innovation will come along as time passes and we'll figure out better ways. But, at least for now, this is what we got. But $4 per square foot, to put in blacktop compared to, 25 cents per square foot for a lawn. Okay. So if you ever do an install and you have a homeowner complaining about that, maybe you can show them these slides and they, would you like me to blacktop your front yard instead? I don't know. Go figure. And concrete, okay, concrete's beautiful. I have a concrete patio behind my house. I have a concrete driveway. All right. It serves a purpose. But concrete, it's going to probably start off in the neighborhood of $5 to $6 per square foot and up. So, again, also very labor and equipment intensive. So, again, compared to grass at 25 cents per square foot. And do I really think this is necessarily going to be easier? And I mean, is it invisible? I mean, let's think about both of these. How many times do we joke about orange barrel season in Ohio, right? April to October, right? I mean, it's like the state tree of Ohio, the orange barrel. So what's wrong with this picture here? these materials, I mean, they're very durable. And if you think about the job that they're doing, I mean, they hold up extremely well. Grass is not going to hold up well on I-71 or I-77. Okay. It's great for the medians, but there's no way it's going to hold up, with that amount of traffic. So we're left to have to use these materials in certain settings, but I'm just using them by comparison to illustrate the point, the relative cost of grass versus these. Maybe now you can start to understand why we see so much acreage on a property committed to turfgrass. It's got a relatively low cost to maintain. You figure, I did some rough math, and I would say for mowing and fertilization on a typical residential lawn, you're probably looking at less than 20 cents per square foot per year to maintain it. So again, we think about that initial cost of installations, about a quarter. The maintenance costs on that are, about 20 cents per square foot. So it's not ridiculous, and that's assuming that you're actually, paying somebody, like if any of you plan on going into business for yourself, somebody paying you to go in. I mean, that's a relatively low cost to pay somebody to maintain it. And comparatively, if you look at the cost for snow removal, especially in Northeast Ohio, I can tell you snow removal, I get into the ice melt and the de-icing business, and selling bulk salt. I can tell you it is significantly more expensive, and time and labor intensive than in-season maintenance. And when you look at these maintenance contracts, usually the snow is the bigger portion. Even though the acreage, let's use Cleveland Clinic for an example, right? How many parking garages and parking areas do they have? And you think about that parking garage, they're only really talking about the upper decks, but it's very expensive, and it's a real pain in the butt to try and maintain those structures. The de-icing materials that you're allowed to use on them to not void the warranty are very expensive. So it's not... again, it's like artificial grass versus natural grass. It's not that, owning a driveway or a parking lot is going to be any cheaper. Okay. It's expensive to put in. It's not going to last forever. Eventually it's going to need repairs. It's going to need to be replaced at some point. It's not a perfect material, but, it's not cheap either. So just because you look at that 20 cent per square foot cost, I would venture to say that, snow removal and lining parking lots and cleaning them, sweeping them for trash and debris and all that kind of stuff, going in and sealing cracks, that's going to be expensive too. So they're not perfect. Okay. You also have to pay to light them. Okay. You have an electric bill to keep them lit for security reasons and for safety. So, there's a lot of, if you really start to think about it like I am right here in discussion, there's a lot of costs. Okay. Nothing is perfect. Nothing is, better than something else. But, when it comes down to it, grass is pretty cheap. That's why we see it, over such a big area of a property. My house, I have a 1,700 square foot patio. I got about the same size driveway and sidewalks out in front of my house. But the rest of my half acre, less the house and paved areas, is all grass. Okay. It's relatively inexpensive, relatively cheap and easy to repair and replace. It's durable. It's resilient. It can self-heal on its own. Okay. Concrete and asphalt can't do that. But, if you have to, if it does get damaged, if it does get destroyed, it's relatively cheap and easy to repair. I mean, in a lot of cases, I can go out on a lawn like this, for example, where maybe it was badly damaged by insects, and we can throw down some grass seed, some coated grass seed, and as long as it's getting watered, call it a day, and in no time at all, you'll have grass growing there again. So it's pretty amazing. We take for granted as landscapers or people in the landscape business, we really take for granted how easy or, how much we can really get away with. Relative to what we charge. Aesthetics, okay? It just looks better. What would you rather look at? Would you rather look at a park-like setting You know, or would you rather look at a barren, you know, vacant lot that's filled with trash? Okay, this could be anywhere. You know, I mean, if you go down to that Fairfax area down on the east side of Cleveland, I mean, you'll see a lot of spaces that are just like that. You know, I must be very pro Cleveland Clinic today, but they've actually been going through. They have an initiative where they're buying up a lot of these vacant lots in and around the Fairfax area, and they're actually going in and removing all the garbage and cleaning them up and planting grass and planting trees and landscape beds in an effort to beautify these areas where all these vacant buildings are being demolished. So, and then, you know, look at this. This could be a path at any one of our metro parks in our area. You know, you could imagine sitting on that bench just about anywhere, but we see again where we have this paved area, you know, the park, or the bike trail. I'm a cyclist. I like to cycle a lot in the summertime. So this looks like a lot of the bike trails I go on. You see, interestingly, we have this area, you know, the berm on either side of the trail and around the bench where it is clearly being mowed. Okay. And they go along in the summertime with riding mowers, and they'll go along and they'll trim these areas along these paths. But then look just to the right of it, and you'll see all of this kind of wild, unmanaged, unmaintained area. Well, what is it? That's grass. In fact, more than likely, it's the same grass that's growing right up next to the trail. I doubt that they planted anything different, but, you know, it just shows you that, you know, even our turf grasses, especially certain ones like tall fescue, for example, they actually work very nicely for naturalized settings. So you could go in and say you have a property and you go in and bid on that property. You could go in and say they have some mound areas or something that they want to have naturalized. Well, you could go in and seed that whole thing with turf type tall fescue and basically mow and maintain it, you know, weekly in the areas that you want, and then just let it go natural in these naturalized areas. The other benefit of using turf in these naturalized settings is it gives you the ability to manage other unwanted species. Okay, so yeah, we have weeds. All right, ooh, weeds, pesticides, ooh, bad, you know, but let's think about it. There are invasive species, right? Wild garlic. My son was in Boy Scouts. They would do campaigns in the spring where they go through wooded areas and pull wild garlic. So you have wild garlic. You have what's it called? The honeysuckle bushes. You know, these are invasive species. Okay. And, you know, one of the most powerful and easiest ways that we can control this is by using turf in a naturalized setting like this. And then you can go in and use selective herbicides to basically kill the undesirable species without harming the turf. So it actually can be